I spent this afternoon, albeit virtually, on screen with Rachel Blevins, our own Texas Rose. We were part of a star-studded panel, it truly was, interviewing, questioning Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry. She was in Moscow. Rachel and I were not, just for the record. But it was a tour de force, and we did cover some very significant issues indeed. And I'm very glad to say Rachel Blevins joins us again now. Rachel, wonderful to see you again today and then this evening, a double whammy for me, and to hear you, moreover, because your work now is attracting huge interest and support online in your podcasts in the United States. Let's start with Maria Zakharova. It's quite something that the second most important woman in the Russian Foreign Ministry in the middle of a war, a nuclear-armed superpower, is appearing in front of the likes of you and me and Larry Johnson, the CIA analyst, as was Pepe Escobar, the great international journalist, and Judge Napolitano. It was quite a galère, I must say. How do you think she did?
Yeah, I'm happy to be back on the show again. Thank you so much for having me. And you were absolutely right. And I do want to add in that before we went into the show, they didn't tell us, okay, you can only ask about this or that or give any kind of guidelines on questions or that sort of a thing. They just told us, hey, show up, ask your questions, and she's there to give her response. And it really was so telling of just how open Russia has been in all of this, that look, they are here, they have made their points clear, and especially as we watch the US try to twist those points and try to make it look like Russia is the country that is closed off and that doesn't want to allow dialogue. And I think the fact that we had her presentation, right, that back and forth that happened on the same day that we're also getting this Axios report that the Trump administration is trying to get Russia to agree to this 28-point plan. A lot of questions about what is in all of those 28 points. But you see the U.S. in this position where maybe finally they're kind of waking up to reality just a little bit, even if they won't fully acknowledge it. Meanwhile, Russia has been acknowledging reality this entire time, right? They've been in this position knowing exactly what they were getting into with this war, knowing what they were getting into with the increasing tensions and the dangers there of what NATO has been pursuing at their doorstep. And yet they are still willing to hold dialogue, to talk to those of us who are in other countries who have various audiences, and knowing that maybe the message will get out there, because it's certainly not going to happen in the mainstream media, the same mainstream media that repeats the lies over and over again, right? They hear that Russia says something and then they immediately go, oh, what did Zelensky say? And then they just repeat his side as if it is the gospel. And I think a lot of people who haven't quite woken up yet to the reality of the current situation are going to be in for a bit of a wake-up call as they finally are forced to face the reality that things are falling apart for Kiev, whether it be on the battlefield, whether it be in Zelensky's own inner circle with this latest corruption investigation, and so on and so forth. And they look at it and they go, wait a second, I thought that Kiev was winning. I thought that the Russian and Ukrainian losses were on the same pace, and now they're being forced to realize that that was simply not the truth and that they were being lied to once again, just as has really always been the case.
Well, look, you made so many great points there. Let me go back through them seriatim. You're right. I'm glad you pointed it out. I actually took it for granted and didn't notice the significance of the fact that we were all there, either in person, some of them, and online like you and me, Judge Napolitano and so on. They had no idea what we were going to say or ask. And there's no Western government would have allowed people like us even into such a face the press, never mind without knowing what balls we were going to be bowling live on television to such a senior figure as her. And it's right that you forced me to acknowledge that point, that the BBC, Sky News, CNN are oftentimes a few meters away from President Putin with the ability to ask anything that they like, while no Russian journalist may even set foot in Britain. Slightly better in your country, but not that much. So that's the first important point that you make. But the other one, second most important one, is the one you just made in closing. How are they going to explain it when this war ends with Russian triumph, whether through the 28-point plan or in the ordinary way, when they lied to us over and over and over again that Ukraine was winning the war, that Russia was merely a gas station with rockets, that it was using parts of washing machines to target its missiles, that the Russians had lost, that Putin was dead, that he was suffering from multi-cancers and heart ailments. How are they going to explain what, by any metric, is about to turn into a massive Ukrainian defeat?
That is the $60 million question right now, isn't it? Because you look at the Trump administration, and this is one thing that I will give Trump credit for. He is the spin master in a lot of ways to his own base, or at least he tries to be, right? That's something that he tries really hard at. He decides, we're going to go to war with the Houthis, we're going to go bomb Ansar Allah in Yemen, as if we didn't learn anything from the several years that we helped the Saudis bomb them and create what was at the time the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The Trump administration goes in, and then they quickly learn, okay, these guys aren't backing down. But what does Trump do? He agrees to a deal with the Houthis, and then he tries to spin it to the public, and he acts like, oh, they capitulated. Anyone paying attention knows that that's not the case, but Trump is really banking on the fact that people are not paying attention. And I think we're seeing a version of that now with the Epstein files, or whatever version of the Epstein files we're actually going to get released publicly, where Trump goes into office promising, hey, you're going to find out what really happened, right? You're going to know all the names on that list. Gets into office, all of a sudden starts backpedaling, but he's getting ready to release a heavily redacted version of that list. And then he'll tell the public, hey, we put everything out in the open. I followed through on my campaign promise. So if I'm looking at what the Trump administration is doing right now, where they're taking this bill and they're amending it to make sure that anything that is quote unquote national security related will be redacted from the Epstein files, aka all of the ties to Central Israel and the blackmail that was going on there. And I look at that, then I go, okay, what is Trump going to do when it comes to Ukraine? Well, this 28-point plan seems like it's setting Trump up to do a version of what he did with Gaza, where he goes in and he goes, quote unquote, the war is over, right? Ignore the genocide, ignore however many truly hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were just killed by Israel with direct support from the US. He acts like he comes in and he solved everything, right? He's just going to get rid of Hamas, the thing that Israel claims that they've been trying to do for the last couple of years now. And I can see Trump trying to do a version of that with Ukraine, where if he gets Russia to agree to any kind of a deal, he's going to try to spin it and act as though, oh, the US won, we figured everything out, we were the third party mediator in the conflict that we were a direct party to. So what I'm going to be watching in the coming days and likely even weeks is Russia. What is Russia going to agree to? Because yes, Russia has been very clear and upfront since the early days of this war in 2022 that these are their demands, right? They want, especially after the referendums that happen later in 2022, they want to make it clear that these 4 additional regions, as well as Crimea, which has been a part of Russia for over a decade, that those are recognized as part of the Russian Federation. But beyond that, they also want to make sure that we don't have another version of this war, that NATO leaves Kiev alone. But then I look at Kiev and I go, I don't know that there is a way for NATO to leave them alone. So I'm a little bit cynical looking at where this conflict is going and whether or not we get a deal. But I'm very curious as to what Russia is willing to agree to, because if there's anything that NATO has shown them up until this point, it's that they cannot be trusted really at any cost.
Well, he's a master at it. I saw him in the White House yesterday, where he was entertaining MBS, whom he elevated to kingship, even though MBS's father is actually still the king. He declared Cristiano Ronaldo to be the greatest footballer of all time, with which I agree, but there's many millions of Lionel Messi fans will viscerally disagree. But in that event, with MBS sitting next to him at the presser, he said, and I'm quoting him directly, "The Palestinians are doing well now. They like me. They really like me." Now, in the string of insane things that Trump has said, to say the Palestinians are doing well now, when they're still in a famine, when the trucks are still not going on, when Israel is still bombing them. And then today he said, Gaza is pretty messy. Not Lionel Messi, messy. Well, messy is one way of putting it, Donald. It is a sea of misery, mass starvation, rotting corpses. The chances of your plan transforming that into Las Vegas are pretty close to zero. So I agree with you, that's probably what he will do. He'll declare victory, but everybody will know that it's been a Russian victory over Ukraine. Now, as Pepe Escobar put it in the final question to Zakharova, this is going to change the world, isn't it? A Russian victory against NATO, getting most, if not all, of their war demands is going to be a huge shot in the arm for the BRICS, for the SCO. It's going to show that the tectonic plates have shifted, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think when you look at what NATO has embarked on here, right, their goal was to weaken Russia, but their goal was also to bring Russia to its knees, right, to force the Russian economy to a halt with all of these sanctions, to force Russia to give up and to say, you know what, let Ukraine be a part of the NATO alliance. Sure, you can bring nukes right on our doorstep, right? There's nothing that we can do about it. But the exact opposite has happened. And as we're seeing it play out in real time, we're seeing just how ill-advised this entire campaign was by the entire U.S. establishment, right? Whether it's Democrats, Republicans, they are all together in this. They thought that they could just throw all of this money, right? Whether it's $200 billion, $300 billion at this point, that they could just throw it at Ukraine and that would somehow equal Ukrainian victory. Excuse me, I was about to say Russian victory, which is about what they have received from it. And when you look at what Russia has done by deciding to embark on a war of attrition, I think that that's very telling, because they could have gone in on one day and gotten Zelensky, gotten some of the key members of his administration, and made just total chaos in Kiev. But they didn't do that. They decided that they were going to launch a war of attrition about truly grinding down and breaking Kiev's military as we know it. And that's what we're seeing happen right now in real time. And a lot of times as you watch the media here in the West, they will focus specifically on territory, right? And they'll say, oh, well, Russia hasn't gained that much territory this year. But that's because of what Russia is doing overall. That's because it's not just about gaining territory. It is about breaking down Kiev's forces. And that's why we're now really starting to see some significant advances. And now you're watching the media backpedal and go, oh, well, Pokrovsk isn't that important, right? Sure, at one point it was a strategic transport hub for Kiev's forces. It's not that big of a deal. Now it's like, yes, it absolutely is. And the advances that Russia is making right now are extremely significant. And I think that NATO may start to wake up to that slowly but surely. They may kind of be realizing, okay, this situation is not looking good for Kiev. And that's why, at the same time, you also have this NABU investigation targeting Zelensky's inner circle as a way to say, okay, time's up. We're not doing this anymore. And I'm very curious to see where it goes from here, because the Kiev regime that the West built with all of this money and all of these weapons is now really starting to fall apart. And there's nothing that NATO can do about that, right? They can send Tomahawk missiles, they can hit targets within Russia. Nothing that NATO can do, aside from full-on nuclear war, is going to change the balance of power on the battlefield. And Russia knows that. And so I hope that when it comes to the negotiations that are had, when it comes to this potential 28-point plan, that's something that Russia keeps in mind, just how much bargaining power they actually do have here. And that NATO also keeps it in mind and realizes the true reality of what they're dealing with when it comes to their project in Kiev that is now spectacularly falling apart.
When we met with Zakharova this afternoon, I did not know what I now know, that for the first time in the war, the entire Ukrainian leadership is outside of the country. Two of them are in hiding from the Anti-Corruption Bureau. One of them, where else? In Israel. The other hiding in Turkey, although he received Zelensky in Turkey today. But he ain't coming back from Turkey, as he's made plain, because he too is in the sights of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. Che Bose, our mutual friend, has said that he gives the head of Zelensky's presidential office 72 hours. He's very certain that he's the next arrest and the next fall from grace. It's getting closer and closer to Zelensky, isn't it? I wonder if it's possible that he might not go home from his current trip. But definitely all roads lead to him. All of his top men can't have been stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from the taxpayer without the president knowing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's going to be very telling to see when Zelensky's time is up. I think we're getting very close to that. It is not a good day to be Zelensky and to be in his position. And we have to remember, just a couple of years ago, the media was telling us that, oh, Zelensky is defeating the corruption, right? He is going after all of the corrupt individuals in his government, when in reality, he was just doing everything in his power to silence dissent. And as we've seen time and time again, when you are a U.S. puppet, your time only lasts for so long. And when the U.S. is done with you, it doesn't look very good. And so maybe Zelensky has some sort of plan for a condo in Miami and he's going to set sail. I don't know. I think it may be a bit darker for him when his time is finally up. But I do think that one thing that we should keep in mind as we watch this play out is, of course, that this Anti-Corruption Bureau was initially installed and backed by the US, right? Because in the aftermath of the 2014 coup in Kiev, they wanted to make it look like they were going after corruption. And so if it's now going after Zelensky and his inner circle, that tells me that to a certain extent, the US is on board with it. They're basically telling Zelensky, hey, we're done with you, we're ready to move on. But I don't have any confidence that the next puppet that leads the Kiev regime is going to be any different, right? Whether they drag Valery Zaluzhny back and get him propped up there, whether they try to make Petro Poroshenko happen again or some other version of that, we have to keep in mind that this will always be a puppet that is in charge of any version of this Kiev regime that is backed by NATO. And so even though they may have a new face on it and they may act like, oh, this new person is going to transform things, it's really just a cover up up to try to take away from how bad the situation is. And so I'm curious to see what the Trump administration is going to do, whether they're going to go all of the way, get rid of Zelensky, or whether they're going to try to push some deal, get Russia to agree with it, and then look at the future from there. Because everything we've seen from the Trump administration and from NATO as a whole has been a Minsk III style deal. It has been a deal that is very heavy on these quote unquote security guarantees for Ukraine, on getting those peacekeeping forces into Ukraine, which we of course know would be the exact opposite of that. And so that's something for Russia to keep an eye on when it comes to these negotiations. And I know that Russia obviously is watching this play out, and they know that any sort of head of the Kiev regime, any sort of sham election, if they have one, is not going to be legitimate as long as NATO has any say in it.